Hey everybody, welcome to week 130, 130. Good to have you on here. You know the drill. Hit us up in Q&A. You can harass us in the chat, and Papa Joe will be very happy to know that we are on our game. We are learning. It's not even 6 weeks into this thing, and we are already establishing a new habit pattern of turning on the chat. So you're in for a treat today. We're going to be talking about all things like pertaining to businesses, helping you save money, make money, stay out of trouble, and have fun. And part of that is we're going to talk about PEOs. And if you don't know what a PEO is, you certainly will. And no dumb questions are allowed. No, I'm just kidding. No questions are dumb. That's the way we're going to approach it, because this could be something that actually is a weapon for you to save money and also have some benefits for hiring and retaining talent. And we'll see, we'll go into that, and we aren't selling anything. What I love about Pair PEO is they're a completely independent broker. They have no agenda, and yet Jeff Warner, who you will meet, was an insider at Insperity. And we love Insperity, and we love all the other PEOs out there. So anyway, you will meet Jeff. We'll launch a poll kind of early on here too, but Jack, I think, has been itching to share with us timely topics besides dad jokes. So
I can throw some dad jokes in there as well. And as always, feel free to give away shoemaker's money, as you tend to do on occasion.
Oh, okay.
Whatever
there you go.
The trivia question is, that'll work. So a couple things. One, to kind of get something off my mind, because I hear it every morning, which is the where some of our money is going, and specifically with forgiving the debts of our recent graduates from schools, and the mixed feelings that people have about that. And that on the one hand, it is, and it is only for essentially a certain period of time of loans. So it is, I think it may be like recent grads, but I don't know what the time frame is. But the number's pretty intense as far as the amount that is proposed to be forgiven. And then those of us who are parents, or are even have paid off our own student loans, are like, well, wait a minute, how fair is that? But then the other side is essentially, well, what about those programs that are out there or have been out there that they might have qualified for? And that, it isn't that anyone who applies is going to get their debt forgiven. There are financial aid requirements, essentially, kind of post loan. So, it's kind of back and forth, but, because we're in political season, we're a month away from midterms-ish, that you're seeing a lot of political back and forth between candidates, and specifically Republican candidates saying, look what Biden and Sherry Beasley are doing to spend our money, essentially. So see both sides of that. The other is that something, when we keep talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, and an aspect of it that we really haven't talked about is how it impacts us as consumers necessarily. We've been talking about as business and indirectly businesses, because businesses are going to be using some of this stuff. But I found a list of, and it's an article put out by the Environmental Defense Fund, and says collectively, we should be able to save more than 1 million households will save over $37 billion a year on energy bills if they pursue these incentives. And so they put a list of eight different areas in your home that you might have the possibility of making some changes that will benefit you, and you will get some incentives from the government. First being electric vehicles. Secondly, thermostats. So households that have, and I don't get any kickback from Nest. I don't even have Nest. I have like Honeywell ones in my house. But to be able to control your thermostat, there is, and this is way off topic, but there is a number that if you put your thermostat too low or too high, the recovery period will cost you more than just leaving it at maybe 1 or 2 degrees differential. Utility rooms, so specifically washers and dryers in the kitchen, your dishwasher, insulation in your house kind of thing, maybe upgrading those or places that you've done some improvements. The actual AC unit outside in your air exchange unit, wherever it is in your crawl space from your attic, and then on the roof, which brings me to another thing, another forewarning that, not that we're all gullible, but I was sort of a little bit gullible. Not, I should say gullible. I let it happen. So guy knocks on the door and says, "Hey, we're doing some roofing work at your neighbor's house. Good news, it's covered. It doesn't impact your insurance rates for next year. And in fact, as people do this, it may collectively increase your rates. And so don't you want to get, since you're kind of indirectly paying for it, don't you want to go ahead and get on the bandwagon?" And so I said, "All right, fine, go up on the roof and check it out." Forgot to tell my wife, who was working from home that day. And so, she's like face to face, her office on the second floor, face to face with a total stranger climbing up on the roof, which I would have liked to have seen. That sounds kind of funny. And so, so she calls me, she's like, "There's some dude on the roof." She doesn't talk like that, but that's my interpretation of it. And I said, "Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to tell you." So I haven't heard what the estimate is. I'm sure that we've had hail damage, even though I don't recall actually having a hailstorm anytime in the recent past. So just be aware of those kind of things, but we'll see what happens. But it is a legitimate concern as to what damage may have been done, and maybe the winds that are going to be coming through this weekend may impact that as well. So just a few little bits of current events, not really much on anything else that we typically talk about with respect to loans or grants or money out there that I can report that is positive, other than the fact that, another political thing is the 87,000 IRS agents that are coming for the middle class, coming specifically for the middle class, depending on what side you're on. And obviously the other side is saying, well, we're way overdue for some revamps. We also talked about, and I think Andrew, when he was on, our former IRS agent that was on the civil side, he wasn't criminal, so I joke around that he didn't really get to carry a gun, so that's not really cool. He said that, yeah, they have machines, and the process in their office, the IRS office, is so antiquated. Like, they try to modernize it, but when you get to step 3, it involves human interaction and literally stapling and unstapling stuff. Restapling stuff that had been stapled together because there was an error when processing the return. So more to come on that, and we'll see. So but beware, again, fraud. Hey, I'm the IRS agent, you need to send me this information immediately or you're going to jail. So beware of that. Tell your kids, tell your parents, as per usual. So there you go.
I think it's interesting that the IRS will probably have the same hiring challenges that every other business owner is having right now, which is finding 87,000 people that actually want to work. So we'll see. Anyway, Adam, I know you have to have something.
Yeah, Chewy says, "Bring it on, IRS agent, bring it on." Yeah, I'm just kidding. On that note, I've got a couple tirades on that. So, I'm not really relishing anybody potentially getting audited any more than the next guy, because trust me, audits are lost leaders for BGW. We hate them just as much because there's never usually that much of any finding. So it seems like a colossal waste of time for our clients anyway. But all that said, for about 3 weeks straight, I've been trying to call the IRS to resolve a matter for a client, and using the special bat line that is only open to people who are duly authorized to call the IRS. So it's like the special CPA. It's called the Practitioner Priority Hotline. The answer has been, "We're too busy to take your call." So, as a practitioner, I'm like, look, I'd like my call to get picked up, please, so I can resolve this matter for my client so they can get their refund back, please, which is probably also somewhat related to being 87,000 employees short. So, I'm like, probably needed. I'm in the camp of need the people just to get to the backlog that exists. So just, as there's a lot of rhetoric right there, just remember that I can't even get her to pick up the phone. Can we just start there, please? So independent of that, this is the lead into Jeff and health insurance, that because that's the other place where there's a lot of rhetoric. If anybody wants to go listen to the YouTube posting that we have out on the BGW CPA website, one day in anger, I did a video on the rising cost of health insurance relative to GDP, and just put that in the context of also educational expenses relative to GDP growth. GDP growth, educational expenses, even though college is really expensive right now, it's ridiculous. Dorms are way too freaking nice. Rec centers are way too freaking nice. It's actually stayed on pace with GDP growth, meaning like GDP growth grew like this, educational expenses grew like this. Healthcare, not so much. GDP like this, healthcare like that. So, it is, I'm just going to share, it is one of those really frustrating, what do we do about this? Topics for every business owner, because there's just, other than to get out and vote and maybe have a politician come up with a better proposed solution, because the conundrum you get into, it's like you hit a certain size, you got to offer benefits. Those benefits, have to be deemed affordable, and it's not, you could be mad all day long about, well, the definition of affordable, that's what's really causing all the problems. But at the same time, your employees are still going to have to spend the money on the costs, like whether it's through insurance or whether it's through the actual medical insurance. It's just, I hope that we do something about overall reducing the amount that we spend per capita on health insurance, to somehow get this down, however they're going to do that, because otherwise, it's like we can save money. It's just, it does not appear that we seem to be doing a ton to address the problem systemically long term. So instead, all we do is get mad at Jeff. Like, why are my rates going up? So anyway, with that in mind, good luck with our audience today, Jeff. And I promise that I won't ask any hard questions.
So before we introduce Jeff, we're going to launch a poll and see how many of you guys are awake. So I just launched it. 2 questions. Do you know what a PEO is? And be honest, so that's why the third option there. I'm nodding my head yes, but honestly, I don't know. So we've got a pretty informed audience. This is really good. Give you a couple more seconds and let's see what you guys say here. So, okay, good. I love the honest soul that said, I'm nodding my head yes, but honestly, I don't know. Whoever that was, if you dare to show your name, send us a message in the chat, and Jack is going to get you a Starbucks gift card for being honest, because, hey, lawyers like honesty, and so do we. All right. So this is interesting. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'm going to share the results with y'all. Look at this. So we've got one really honest soul that's going to get a gift card if they dare hit us in the chat, that doesn't really know what a PEO is, but they're saying yes with their head. Most people know what a PEO is, but most companies, most people on this are not using a PEO. So interesting. And there's nobody that's on here, or there is one, looks like, that had, yes, we did, but we no longer do. So Jeff, give a little bit of your background, because I think it does make a difference. You aren't here to sell, even though I'm advertising your free swag. I appreciate it. It's very, very comfortable t-shirt, by the way.
You paid full retail for that.
Oh, I probably did. Yeah. So anyway, give a little bit of your background, and then let's get into what it is, where it works, where it doesn't work, and kind of why you're not selling anything. And that's what I like about it, because he's not. And I can give an example later on of introducing a company that I was helping coach to a PEO. They didn't know what one was. And unfortunately, I didn't know Jeff at the time. So I subjected them to the beauty pageant of of these three PEOs. One was Insperity at kind of a high end, another one kind of a middle market with ADP, and then another one, BBSI, which was a little bit more bare bones. They ended up choosing Insperity, but they still had to go through the beauty pageant, which is really frustrating because you're just listening to salespeople talk about why their widget is better, and you may not even understand what the widget is, and you may not even really understand what you need and what you don't need. And that's what I like about Jeff. He is just going to cut through the red tape, no BS, and be honest with you, and which is what I really, really like. Oh, Melissa, you rock. So could you make sure, Jack, that you send Melissa that shoemaker Starbucks card? I love it. Thank you, Melissa. You are a brave soul and honest on top of that. So good job. All right, Jeff.
Wait a
take it
minute.
away.
Just for the record, she only sent that to us. So I don't know if she was like, okay. Oh, she says she's being transparent. Okay, so we're good with that.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
And I didn't mention her
I'll
last
up the
name. but
amount because she was being honest and transparent.
I love it.
Okay.
You're a good soul. All right, Jeff, take it away.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gary. Yeah, I'm Jeff Warner. I moved to Charlotte 8.5 years ago from Ohio, and kind of fell butt backwards into the PEO space, and was interviewing over at Insperity, was where I really cut my teeth in the PEO industry. The concept of PEO, I think, makes a ton of sense. You're leveraging large buying power and large human resource tools and resources for an organization that's smaller, that wouldn't be able to kind of afford to put all these things in place themselves. I just always found that when I worked at Insperity, you do kind of go through a 4 or 5 meeting sales process, and then ultimately the client's kind of sitting there, wait, what does this cost? I kind of want it, but what does it cost? And I always found that to be a massive waste of my client's time. And not just my client's time, but my time too, because if ultimately the price points aren't going to make sense, there's really no reason to go through meeting 3, 4, 5 before you end up showing the pricing. So 3.5 years ago, I started my brokerage for the PEO space to basically help clients understand the pricing first, to see if it's going to really be interesting enough to start interviewing PEOs. So it kind of gets them to third base with the PEOs, spending 15, 20 minutes with me. I can go shop the market for them, let the PEOs fight over that business for the client, come back to them with the best proposals that I'm finding, and ultimately help them walk into a productive relationship if there is one out there. Again, like my space, again, the PEO space in general has always been about an average client size of about 25 employees. However, the pandemic has dramatically changed that and kind of widened the net for a lot of different reasons. I can get into those, but obviously the competition for talent has never been higher. Work from home has all of a sudden become the way that most businesses are operating. So a very centralized workforce in 2019 maybe you had all your employees in Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, it's not that hard to manage compliance and regulatory concerns when you have all your employees in one state. Through the pandemic, people were hiring people in every state, wherever they could find talent. And so now all of a sudden you got to have national medical plans so that you can cover people in whatever metro that they live in. You also have to manage compliance in every state that you're hiring people in. And whenever you're in a PEO relationship, they manage all that for you because they're co-employing you, which is how they get their massive amount of buying power that they give for benefits. And that's usually what's going to drive down the biggest cost center that PEOs can really impact. And so that's when most people will pull me in for a conversation, is when they're talking to a PEO rep, is usually an ADP client that's using their basic payroll function. They hit a certain employee count that triggers a introduction to their total source, which is their PEO solution. They start getting entertained by this whole concept of PEO and all it can bring to the table. But then they go through that big process of, potentially interviewing multiple PEOs, having 3 to 4 meetings with each of them, and then trying to ascertain the differences in pricing and competence between the PEOs is almost impossible for them to do as a first-time buyer of the industry. You're on mute there, my bud.
Sorry, I turned my mic off. Talk about where you see, I know it's kind of a general term, but where a PEO probably doesn't make sense when it's this small or this big, and why are those drivers? So what I heard was, what I know is health insurance can be driven down, especially because of the buying power of hundreds of thousands of, sometimes even more, people in that PEO network. So talk about that. Also talk about, well, hey, wait a minute, if they're co-employed, what happens to my culture? You know, what does that mean? So if you could hit those two things, I think it'd be really helpful.
Sure. Where it doesn't make sense, ultimately, it depends on if the client's trying to accomplish a cost reduction play, is where they're going to have lower participating groups on medical. Again, that's going to be the biggest line item that we're going to impact in the PEO industry. So if I'm a 20-person company with 8 people taking medical coverage, I'm only impacting those 8 employees' premiums. I'm not impacting the other 12. And there's administrative fees associated with the PEO relationship that are going to greatly outweigh that. So I'd say it's easy to disqualify a prospect that's just trying to chase to the bottom and try to get the best total cost and try to reduce costs in this exercise. If you're trying to reduce expenses, you're really going to need somewhere between 75% and 90% participation on your medical plan. And obviously employers are offering medical plans because it's a value to the employees. It helps them attract and retain talent. So if they're offering that to their employees and that many people are participating in it, that means that they do appreciate that what the employer is putting on the table for them. And usually the math can make a little bit more sense for them. And the prototype in my space, I'm going to go through 3 different examples of the buyer persona of what I typically see. It's usually one of these. It's a startup, a 5-person group that's just like, listen, I don't want to manage healthcare premiums and renewals and all the things that go along with it. I just want to turn a key and be completely competitive for benefits that I'm offering my future employees as I go out and hire. And ultimately, it does streamline that whole employee life cycle for a company so that they're not having to put staff in place day one to be able to administer the employee life cycle for their employee growth. The second category, I think that Adam's reference around the hockey stick growth in inflation around medical premiums is going to be in play. So let's say it's like somewhere between a 30 and a 75-person group that's been in business for 10 plus years, has gone through the Obamacare administration, which is where everything kind of got crazy with the increases. Things have stabilized a bit now in the open market, but for the years that we were rolling out the healthcare.gov exchange, increases could have been 30, 40, 50% for small and medium-sized groups. And so if I look at a group like that endured that, they're likely going to be the ones that I can carve up their premiums by 30, 40% to get them back to where they should be today if they've gone through those types of things. And the third buying criteria is usually a bigger group that's got somewhere between 100 and 500 employees. This is what the pandemic has really accelerated this type of buying persona for me specifically, is they may have a 3 or 4 or 5-person HR team. Well, most people in the last, 24 months have job jumped once, maybe even twice. So those types of departments just have not been anything but frustrating for those types of employers. So if they have 1 or 2 that have been there with some tenure that they can stick with, they can basically outsource the other functions of HR to a PEO, keep the 2 headcount that are stable and permanent fixtures inside their organization, but then outsource kind of all the tactical, reactive, compliance-related, boring stuff that most HR people really loathe. Your question around culture, ultimately, your PEO relationship is what you make of it, honestly. Like, you can treat it just like a payroll relationship. Like, they have no real oversight over your employees. They don't really dictate who you hire, fire, how you manage, promote, anything like that. I mean, you're really just using them for their buying power for benefits, and then the consolidation of all those things into one platform that's really easy to use for a shortened HR staff.
That was quite helpful. Really helpful. I know especially with everybody and how you answered the polls. A lot of you guys are not using PEOs. A lot of you know what PEOs are. Hit us up with some questions that you may have, and you can be anonymous. So, again, no question is stupid. But there's a lot of people. Yeah,
I was going to say, Gary, I can predict the why as to why there's a lot of no's that know what a PEO are, but are not involved with one to date. And I can speak to this from my previous experience being a direct rep, because you really try to get the hook in on this medical cost reduction premiums. And then you put them through that big, long sales process, and then you show them that the total cost of your relationship is going to be far greater than what the medical offset's going to look like. So I feel like a lot of people that have gone down the direct sales path likely have probably gotten frustrated by, hey, I was told I'm going to save a bunch of money and now I'm going to spend a bunch more money. And oh, wait, I just spent 5 different meetings with this person to come to that conclusion when it probably could have been laid out from the get-go. Another piece of that I will say from the broker space that I obviously champion, when I run an RFP for my clients, my PEOs are not competing against status quo. They're competing against all of their peers. So usually whenever I'm running these RFPs, I'm going to see significantly better rates and a better total bottom line for my clients, just because whenever I was selling direct for Insperity or any PEO selling direct to a client, they're just competing against this current cost. They don't really care about what the rest of the market says things should be. They're trying to get close to a cost neutral, where I'm trying to create a bigger dent in their overall P&L by bringing more parity to each deal. Someone's got to get the mute police on him.
I know. Come on. Jack, you had raised your hand, something that you wanted to say.
Yeah, so question, I'll start out the round of questions. So with our organization, with the law firm, so we have maybe 270 lawyers. So then add on all the admin, legal assistants, paralegals, et cetera. And what I've seen is, and I'm fortunate because my wife is in the medical industry. And so we're on her insurance, but I've watched my partners suffer through the increases and the changes. And in talking to our HR people, it is, well, we have people that are not as healthy. We have people that are having babies. We have COVID that has impacted people. And we have people that their kids are getting sick and bringing it home more so. I don't know if any of that is true, but how do those things impact? Like if you were doing a comparative analysis and say, okay, we see that these are variables that are increasing your overall rates, how would a PEO environment kind of reduce those increases or address those increases so it isn't as painful?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they're spreading the risk across, hundreds of thousands of people. So theoretically, you should see less increases based on your overall group's performance, based on, just having more premium that they're collecting across all their clients. So that's one way you should see less significant increases. I'm assuming on a group your size, are you guys leveraging a self-insured plan? Do you have any idea in that, Jack?
Well, I don't believe we are, because I keep seeing, we're switching between Cigna and Aetna and some other, and it's
doing some
really
carrier
controlled out of
jumping.
our home office in Ohio, but yeah, so that's not yet. I know they've talked about it, but I don't know if it's appropriate. Do you have? I feel like I'm asking you for my own benefit, but I mean, professional services. Like, I guess maybe that's a good question as to what type of industries are there industries that are more? And now I'm asking a question for everybody, not just for myself. More industries that are more conducive or appropriate for a PEO environment versus other industries, regardless of size. Let's assume it's the appropriate size.
Sure. I mean, obviously, the more competitive the market is for talent, the more appropriate the PEO solution is going to be. So you see PEOs always rolled out in SaaS companies, tech companies, professional service companies, because everyone's competing for the same talent. And ultimately that's going to be and the PEO solution as a whole is going to offer, 5-6 medical packages. It's going to be very appropriate for multiple generations. So you look at a company like yours that probably has Gen Zers through baby boomers, you're going to have packages that make sense for each individual, not just, kind of a two fits all type of strategy that a traditional broker might roll out for you. And also because those competitive industries are generally contributing a lot towards medical premiums. So if I'm saving 20% on medical premiums, but the company's only picking up 50% of that, then ultimately I'm saving the employee, but I'm also saving I'm only going to save the company 50% of that 20%. So it can make the math a little bit wonky on whether or not the administrative fees are going to get outweighed. But at the end of the day, it just depends on how your current cost structure is looking. Like a group like yours, that many people, you're probably spending $3 or $4 million a year in premium. The PEO market should bring that down by at least $1 million. So you'd have a pretty compelling reason to look at the industry, but it just depends on where people are at and what they're comfortable with on making a transition. Because ultimately you have to fire a lot of people to hire me, frankly. So usually it just depends on where those relationships lie, what are they willing to let go of, and whether or not they're willing to make those relationships disappear by kind of turning the key and letting the PEO operate all this stuff.
Okay, so a follow-up question that is unrelated, but how does switching impact my relationship with and I'm guessing it would not, but my current service, my current providers, my doctors, my ability to go into CVS or Walgreens and fill a prescription? I mean, is there any impact on any of those?
It should be enhanced. Generally, it's enhanced. I mean, it should be. I think ultimately, like if you had some carrier anxiety, they could also just focus on the carrier. I can think on a PEO. That's what the broker model for me works so well. Is that if you guys were super blue bias or UHC bias or whatever, and you didn't want to have a carrier change, you could replicate that same network with a PEO, and they would just have more plan options inside of that package available for the employees to choose.
Yeah.
So a question came in from Andrew. Compare a traditional payroll service versus an ASO versus a PEO. And then he also said, look at a captive if you can for self-insured piece. And
he's talking to Jack there. I think he's talking to Jack there.
Yeah, you may have been doing that, but speak to what a captive is, because not everybody may know what a captive is and where that fits.
Yeah, so I don't do any work with captives, but they're going to try to replicate this. Usually it's industry specific captives where they're going to have a bunch of, let's call it, home builders or engineering firms or what have you that all kind of join together to create buying power the same way that a PEO would. PEO is going to be more distributed across all kinds of different industries, so that can benefit or hurt a different industry captive that might be a better fit for somebody. It just depends on exactly what industry they're in and how claims usually run on that captive. Answering his question around traditional payroll versus ASO versus PEO, your basic payroll function speaks for itself. It's really just meant to get your people paid and you basically prepare your taxes and all that type of stuff. The ASO model is trying to mirror the consolidation strategy that a PEO is, but it doesn't have the buying power element to the benefit structure. So ultimately, you're supposed to have a single sign-on platform that's going to do your benefit administration, potentially your workers' comp, and some of your HR-related tools that would be encompassing there. Their administrative fees will be a lot less than a PEO, probably about somewhere between 60 to 70% less than what you'd see inside the PEO market. So that would just depend on how high the medical premiums are as to whether or not the PEO solution would make more sense or the ASO model leveraging open market medical would make more sense. And then obviously the PEO is going to be more of the all-encompassing where there's shared risks, they're co-employing. Ultimately, they're using that co-employment strategy to generate buying power, which drives rates down for medical premiums. Does that adequately answer that, Andrew?
So, oh, all right, cool. He gave you a thumbs up.
Jeff, can you also address, I mean, a lot of times, clients, when they start asking about a PEO, they think it's going to solve all my HR problems because I'm going to have an HR person on staff, which they read as, wow, I'm going to have somebody who's going to do all my performance reviews, fire all my people for me, blah. And I just, yeah,
it's not that. It's not that.
I was going to say, it's not that. So can you kind of talk through, like, what is kind of the HR function that you can count on to be done, really well versus like, what are you really going to have to accept? Like, look, even if you do this, you're still going to own this kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, and that's a honestness that a lot of PEO reps will sell it to clients ultimately. Hey, you don't need an HR person. This is going to be completely outsourced. And then you realize that the CEO is managing the HR relationship with the PEO, and the PEO doesn't do anything without any guidance from an on-site person. And I can tell you, a CEO of a 5-person company is not going to interact with their PEO at all. It's going to be a turnkey benefits and payroll solution basically for them. So the things that, in an ideal world, in my opinion, of the PEO space, is you have a competent HR person that lives inside of the organization that's going to use the PEO basically to automate a lot of the transactional things that happen inside of an organization, the reactive stuff. So benefit related questions, pay stubs, benefits enrollment, your 401k enrollment, all the things that are your I-9s, your W-4s, basically all the stuff that's associated with the employee life cycle of an employee is going to be housed on that platform and kind of out of sight, out of mind for the HR leader inside the organization. So it's really meant to take care of all of the compliance and tactical stuff that goes along with HR. It's not going to do anything without, my previous employer is pretty good about, doing some on-site stuff with HR headcount that's part of their portfolio of clients. But if you're not proactively bringing them into your organization, they're going to be happy to be a quiet partner on the back end and let their automation be their primary value driver of the relationship.
Yeah, it seemed to me kind of the best that you might be able to get is exactly like you just said. Like if you had like workers' comp or OSHA safety training, required, it's like you can handle that stuff. But like, my CPE, not so much, or Jack Seal, not so much. That it's like, hey, that benefit seems to be a little bit oversold.
Yeah, it certainly is. And again, like I think that these relationships are best served whenever you do have somebody that really owns the relationship, because if you do have somebody that owns the relationship, they're literally interacting with them every day. If Adam Boatsman is managing the relationship, you're hoping to never interact with them again. I mean, frankly, besides looking at renewals and signing up for the next year of medical rates with them, but it's very ambitious for people to assume that they're going to actually be able to get everything out of the relationship if they're not the one that's living inside of the department, inside of the organization. So it's better served if you're trying to hire a generalist next to your HR leader. Yeah. You can always make the case for a PEO in a situation where you're saying, I'm going to hire somebody that's going to help out my HR person because he or she is just overburdened and they're likely going to leave if it continues to persist. You can hire a PEO to adequately replace that need for an additional hire, get the advantage of the benefit reductions, and their administrative fees shouldn't outweigh what the cost of that employee would be.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Jeff.
So this is going to sound stupid, but I'm going to say it anyway. So are there any additional buying power benefits of having a PEO with relationship to 401k or other insurance related benefits, like for Keyman or, split dollars or anything like that? Are there any benefits there?
Yeah, so the 401k is typically the easiest thing for people to roll into the PEO relationship because it comes automated through the same platform. Again, employees can go on the fly and change their deductions and contributions. There's no manual processes needed for the company, and they become the fiduciary on it because you're using their multiple employer plan. And ultimately, there's none of the testing and things that would need to be filed on your behalf if you're going to be doing individual TPA here in Charlotte, filing your 5500s. So that's the most common add-on. Your ancillary benefits, you should have better rates and stuff like that too, but it's such pennies compared to the medical premium. So if you're saving 10% on dental, no one's getting excited about that. 10% on vision, definitely no one's getting excited about that, but you should save on the disability functions, short and long-term life insurance. All that stuff should be somewhat of a cost savings for the group, but Keyman stuff's a little bit more sophisticated than what many PEOs are really going to put their stamp on.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And for the blue collar groups that are spending, $10,000 to $20,000 to $100,000 in comp premiums, and they have clean loss ratios, like they should see 20-30% reductions in workers' comp premiums too, leveraging the PEO space. Most of my clients live inside of tech and professional services, so that the comp premiums are pennies and aren't really a huge conversation piece.
Okay. Well, and it's interesting too, like what we found, because we're going through that process. We haven't made a determination for the CPA side of the business, but on our wealth side, it's a much smaller group, much younger group. And you found a PEO that really caters towards that demographic and that size, and saving them some significant money with better benefits, which I thought was really interesting. And a couple of the early options that Jeff has kind of scurried up for us, one was, and we only have about just shy of 80 people or so. One was a $30,000 a year savings. About 2/3 of that was going to our employees. Another one is actually about double that. And so we're still exploring, but $60,000 is not chump change, and especially if you can get better benefits. So again, but I'm assuming, so I'm extremely familiar with Insperity. I know one of the founders of it, and it's a very good company. There are other good companies out there though too. And there are some that I've never heard of. Like what's the chance, or let's talk about service levels too, because there's this I honestly had a bias that, well, if it's not Insperity, it's not going to be that good a service. I just had that kind of bias, again, knowing one of the founders, et cetera. So let's talk about that, and what are the things that you have to be careful for, because I'm sure in the PEO space, it's just like anything else. There are probably some less than great companies, without naming names, that aren't as reputable or may not be around in 2 years.
Right. I'd say that most PEOs have adopted an Insperity style selling strategy. Like if you talk to every PEO, you're going to assume that they all do exactly the same. Insperity definitely is more hands-on, especially here with local companies, because I'm going to say they have 6 or 8 PHRs there in South Park, so they can operate on site and have a more intentional face-to-face relationship with their clients. Most other PEOs, you should assume it's always going to be a digital relationship, and it's always going to require a lot of effort from your HR staff to actually get them to do what you are wanting them to do. So, ultimately, again, I think that if you're buying the PEO solution as if it's going to be an enhancement to your HR department and something you're going to really invest a lot of time, energy, and hours with, you're better off paying the premium of Insperity, because you know that they're ultimately going to be a much less frustrating provider for that space. But in a case like you guys, where I feel like it's more of a, hey, let's get better benefits, get a better total cost relationship, automate all the things that are nuisances for us that nobody wants to own, get turnkey compliance. I mean, every PEO does that with grace, in my opinion. Insperity is no more exceptional at that than anybody else is. And that includes some very commoditized PEOs. And so it just depends on what the client's really trying to accomplish. Insperity does a really good job of what I call a trade up, like for groups that really like the PEO industry, but have just become frustrated by the turnover on the HR seat that they're interacting with for the client or for the PEO, because the Great Resignation was massively devastating to the PEO service side. And all of them are trying to backfill those positions. And that's probably why there's not a lot of HR talent to be had when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses being able to place them. But Insperity generally gets the clients that love the industry, but do not like the responsiveness of their current incumbent. And then they can justify the step up in cost, which is rather significant if you're going to make the jump to Insperity. They just generally don't get clients that are coming straight from, a basic payroll relationship going into their admin fees on day one.
Yeah, that's quite helpful. Any questions besides, and Andy, you can keep hitting us with questions. You always have great, really good questions. It's always good to see you on here too. But any other questions out there? Jeff, how does somebody reach out to you to get a hold of you? What's the best way for somebody that's interested to talk to you?
Well, they tell Gary Fry, and then Gary Fry tells me.
That's it. That works. I could do that.
Yeah, no,
Trust BGW.
I'd say that, people reach out to me in a lot of ways. I mean, I've built this business on referral, word of mouth, biz dev, and that either comes through LinkedIn and, LinkedIn messages. It comes through text messages a lot of times. If some of my more, folks that like to operate in a texting relationship, that's perfectly fine. Email's good too. I usually will just get my Calendly link out to whoever would like to have a conversation. And it doesn't need to be, again, like it could just be more theoretical with a lot of groups. Like if they just want to see what the industry might look like for them, I can go run an RFP, show them all the math first, and then they can tell me, yeah, this probably could make sense for us down the road. It doesn't make any sense for us right now. And, we can wipe our hands of it and kind of give them some certainty that they shouldn't be pushing that rope and going through the sales processes with some of the direct reps in the market. But those are generally anytime anybody wants to reach out to me, LinkedIn's probably, the main social media platform that I'm using throughout the day.
Cool. Well, we say that we like to help people save money, make money, stay out of trouble, and have fun, but that's all included with this. But I think part of it, one of the things that made the light bulb go off for me when I met Jeff, besides the fact that I spent 13 winters in Cleveland, Ohio, and so we have that bond of dark gray skies and cold weather up there, but was the fact that you save frustration and time. That I think is a huge thing, because having to go through a bunch of beauty pageants of PEOs and they're just I don't mean to say just salespeople, but it's a lot of time you got to spend to hear sales pitches and you don't know what the heck they're talking about. And it's really confusing, I think.
Yeah.
So I wish I would have known about you when I recommended these three options to another company, and they're happy with what they went with, but I would have saved them a lot of time. And so anyway, so maybe we're going to have to adjust our tagline, Adam. So it's save money, make money, stay out of trouble, have fun, and save time.
Yeah.
It's too much. It's just too much.
No, again, I really appreciate you guys having me on here. And again, I think that my industry, because it's growing so much in popularity, it's only, again, people just need help buying the right one and making sure they're saying yes to the right thing. No one wants to deal with a payroll transition. They definitely don't want to do it twice. So making sure they hit the mark on the front end with the provider that they're going with and know all the things they need to know going into that is very important to making sure that we, hit that success rate that they're looking for.
If there's one last piece of advice you would give somebody in contemplating that decision, et cetera, like what would be the one piece of advice you would give?
I would say that I would tell them to have a broker look at it. I don't care if it's me. I would say, have someone look at it that knows the industry. It's like, going to buy a helicopter for the first time. You just don't know what you don't know. And you don't know whether or not you're signing up for a good deal, a bad deal. You just honestly have no idea until you walk into that relationship and then some other sales rep comes up to you and tries to undercut that solution 2 years down the line. So I think having somebody have a second set of eyes on any proposal is a really smart thing to do. Also, if you're an incumbent PEO client that's super happy, your current incumbent can also come down dramatically. If you would like to have me look at what the competitive market looks like and you don't want to make a transition, but you want to be able to posture a negotiation with your incumbent, that's a perfectly useful exercise for me to keep helping small businesses here kind of battle against the Goliaths that they're partnered with.
Oh, that's a good point. I love it. There you go. There's the save money part. Jack, any other thoughts? Were you able to get Melissa's? I think it was Melissa. Yeah.
I got it.
All right,
All
Melissa. Congratulations. Good job. Thanks for being on here. Anything else from you, Adam? No.
All right, had to pull out my own unmute off. No, I'm good. I really appreciate the time, Jeff. As I said, it's been something that every time we face our own renewal, my blood pressure goes up to here. I get angry. I get on my soapbox and tirade. At the same time, I want to do what's right by the employees. So I look forward to seeing what our own results are going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jack, did you have any dad jokes that you wanted to leave us with?
No, I mean, it's already kind of, well, it's getting windy, a little bit dark, so I don't want to make it the day any darker psychologically. But Jeff, thank you for your words today. It is demystifying some of that, and it kind of makes sense, and not just in what you're doing, but just generally speaking. You bring the collective to get a larger collective, and then you're dispersing that cost. I think that maybe the kind of common fear is that, okay, but now you have more people in the pool, so there's more illnesses, et cetera. So, it's about, I think, about averages and about the means and the medians and everything else that goes into the calculating of all that stuff. So, appreciate
One note on that, Jack, real quick. PEOs don't underwrite the same way that a fully, like obviously in the fully insured market, per the ACA, everybody has to get quoted, and the rates will be the rates in the open market. You could talk to an NFP or a One Digital or a small little brokerage. Your rates are going to be your rates in the open market. PEOs are very choosy about who they'll even take on. So a lot of times, if they feel like there's too much adverse risk inside of a group, they won't quote it out. So that's kind of how they protect their book. And there's ways that you can leverage what's called GRX, which is a pharmacy utilization underwriting tool, which will tell them if there's a cancer in the population. It'll tell them if there's an MS in the population. It'll tell them if there's something that they're going to be overextending themselves on a claims perspective. So that's one way that they keep the books clean. And so, yeah, just one thing to be mindful of. So if you got a group that's all male dominated in their 30s, like every PEO wants that. Like the medical rates that I'll see will be 40-50% lower than the open market. If that same population was all females right in the baby making years, like my premiums look terrible versus the open market. So it just comes down to the overall makeup of the group and whether or not the PEO is going to really want the business and whether we can leverage it effectively for the client.
Good stuff. And Melissa, you just made our day. She said, super helpful. My answer to the question is different now. Hey, that's why we did this, right? That's good. And plus she got some Starbucks. So enjoy that Starbucks and get out there before it starts raining tomorrow. So be safe out there. Don't take anything lightly, especially on the potential flooding and that sort of thing. That's no joke. So
get your patio umbrellas off of your decks, which I just remembered right now. So yes, those kind of things that can fly around that might launch.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Because they're saying what 35-mile-an-hour winds could be. The last trajectory I saw is it's like just on the west side of Charlotte. Who knows, which way that this thing's really going to go. But I was with some guys from Naples, Florida this morning early, and they've got homes there and they don't know how they fared. So
yeah, I just got a message we have offices in Tampa and Sarasota, and so one of my partners, she showed me she took a photograph of the building, and we're in a 5-story building in downtown Sarasota, and there's some of the windows are missing. Like there are things that have been launched into some of the windows, and she circled, we have 2 floors there, and there's like 2 circles. And then at her house, she said no power, lost 2 trees, it's 75 and sunny. So they're very blessed that it wasn't more damage than that. So
wow.
Yeah, very interesting. So we're all praying for everyone to be safe down there and stay safe.
Yeah. For anybody that came on late, and if you missed the front end, especially on Jack's insights and Adam's rants, it will be up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon. So thank you all for being here. It's always good to have you. Next week, 131. Be here or be square. Take care. Thank you again, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.